the FCC's net neutrality rules. About 4 hours of debate on that, and then they'll resume work on a bill repealing a 3% withholding tax from certain federal contractors. And now live to the U.S. Senate floor here on C-SPAN 2.
Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, increase our faith, hope, and love. Give our lawmakers more faith to trust you when the skies are dark, and to believe that in everything you are working for the good of those who love you. Give them more hope to refuse to despair, to accept disappointments without cynicism, and to experience failure, yet try again. Give them also more love, to be loyal to you, to persevere though pressed by many a foe, and to do unto others as they would have others do unto them. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., November 9, 2011. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a senator from the state of New York, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Madam President.
Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, following leader remarks, the Senate will be in morning business for 70 minutes, with the Republicans controlling the first 40 minutes and the majority controlling the final 30 minutes. Following morning business, the Senate will consider the motion to proceed to Senate Joint Resolution 6 regarding net neutrality with up to 4 hours of debate. Upon the use or yielding back of time, the Senate will resume debate on H.R. 674, the 3% Withholding Repeal Act with the Veterans Jobs Amendment. Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Madam President.
Republican Leader.
I ask consent that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Later today, the Senate will take up S.J. Res. 6, Senator Hutchinson's resolution of disapproval of the FCC's net neutrality regulations. I want to start by thanking Senator Hutchinson for her leadership on this important issue. While we all understand the importance of an open Internet, I think we can also agree that the growth of the Internet in the last 15 years is an American success story that occurred absent any heavy-handed regulation here in Washington. We should think long and hard before we allow unelected bureaucrats to tinker with it now. Everywhere I go in Kentucky, I hear from businesses, large and small, that they're struggling to comply with the mountains of rules and regulations coming out of Washington. At a time when the private sector would like to create jobs and grow the economy, it seems like too many here in Washington want to create regulations and grow government. And so, like many Americans, I was heartened 2 months ago when the President came to the Capitol and laid out a very specific test for judging the merits of federal regulation. Like most of my colleagues, I applauded when the President told us that, quote, we should have no more regulation than the health, safety, and security of the American people require. Every rule should meet that common sense test. But as it turns out, the FCC didn't get the memo. The net neutrality regulations we're debating today clearly fail that common sense test. They're a solution in search of a problem. In an overreaching attempt to fix the Internet when the Internet is not broken. According to the FCC's own data, 93% of broadband subscribers are happy with their service. And if Americans weren't happy with their provider or felt that the provider was favoring some forms of content over others, they could switch providers. But now the FCC says its regulations are necessary because of what might happen in the future, if broadband providers have incentives to favor one type of content over another, despite the fact that after 15 years, there's no evidence of this occurring in any significant way. If Internet providers were so interested in doing this, wouldn't they have done it by now? Instead, the FCC has exceeded its authority to grow the reach of government under the guise of fixing a problem that doesn't even exist. So why should this matter to anyone? Simply, the growth of the Internet is one of the great success stories of our lifetime. Just 15 years ago, the thought that you could read a book, watch a ball game, and video conference with your kids all on a device the size of a magazine, we would have all thought was something from science fiction. Today, it's reality. The Internet has transformed society precisely because people have been able to create and innovate largely free from government intrusion. Businesses are free to invest and grow on the Internet, safe in the knowledge that consumers and technology will determine their fate, not the whims of Washington regulators. This investment in broadband infrastructure is the cornerstone of our high-tech economy, which employs nearly 3.5 million Americans. But the FCC's regulations could jeopardize this future growth by dictating what sort of return businesses can earn on their investment. As my colleague Senator Hutchinson and I recently noted, lower returns means less investment, which in turn means fewer jobs. Some estimates suggest we could lose 300,000 jobs as a result of these rules. Thankfully, it's not too late to act. A bipartisan majority in the House voted to overturn these rules earlier this year. The Senate should take the opportunity to do the same. In order to protect the growth of the Internet and its ability to create jobs of the future, I would encourage my colleagues to support the Hutchinson resolution. Now, Madam President, on another issue, when something good happens here in the Senate, I think it's important that we all acknowledge it. So I want to start this morning by thanking our friends on the other side for finally agreeing to join us in making some progress on the nearly 24 bipartisan jobs bills the House has already passed. And I want to urge them to keep at it, to keep pressing ahead with jobs bills both parties will actually support. That way we'll show the American people that we're capable of accomplishing something together up here when it comes to jobs. For months, House Republicans have been executing on a plan to identify ideas that would not only help spur private sector job creation, but which would also attract strong bipartisan support. And for weeks, I've been urging the Democratic majority here in the Senate to take these bills up so they can become law. And this week, Senate Democrats finally agreed to move ahead with two of these bipartisan proposals: a repeal of the 3% withholding rule that will ease the burden on government contractors, and a veterans bill that not only helps returning servicemen and women find jobs, but which also helps those who hire them. Neither of these bills is going to solve the jobs crisis, but they'll help a lot of Americans who deserve it. And they'll go a long way in showing the American people there's plenty we can agree on up here. My suggestion now is that we don't stop there. Let's just keep it up. Let's take up and pass the rest of the bipartisan jobs bills House Republicans have already passed with bipartisan support right across the dome. I've highlighted one of those bills already this week, one that makes it easier for businesses to raise the capital they need to expand and create jobs. This morning, I'd like to highlight another, the Shareholder Registration Thresholds Act, H.R. 1965, a bill that increases the number of shareholders that are allowed to invest in a community bank before that bank is required to shoulder costly new burdens from the SEC. For 3 years now, we've been talking about the urgent need for growing businesses to have access to capital so they can expand and hire. And yet, because of an outdated law, the smaller community banks that want to make loans to help these growing businesses are subject to burdensome regulations that shouldn't even apply to them. H.R. 1965 would increase the threshold of shareholders that trigger the requirement from 500 to 2,000. A companion bill in the Senate that would do the same thing is co-sponsored on the Republican side by Senator Hutchison, among others, and on the Democratic side by Senator Pryor, among others. And Senator Toomey has a bill, S. 1825, to expand this legislation by applying it to businesses other than banks. Now, we should take these bills up here in the Senate and pass them as soon as possible with the same show of bipartisan support that the two parties mustered on behalf of H.R. 1965 last week. Just like the bipartisan House-passed jobs bill I highlighted yesterday, H.R. 1965 passed the House last week with nearly unanimous support. The vote was 420 to 2, with 184 Democrats voting in support. Only 2 people out of the entire 435-member House voted against the bill. The President's Jobs Council has endorsed the idea, and top Democrats have been vocal proponents of this legislation proposed by House Republicans. Here's House Minority Leader Congressman Hoyer on H.R. 1965 just last week. Quote, "We need to see lending to small businesses and homeowners," he said, "but they're hamstrung in their attempt to raise capital by outdated SEC registration requirements." I completely agree with Steny Hoyer. Here's Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. "Small businesses need access to loans and other lines of credit in order to build their businesses and to create jobs," she said. "Before us is a measure that would allow small businesses to get the support they need." I completely agree with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Look, it's not every day that Congresswoman Lee and I agree on legislation. So I think we should lock this down. Let's pocket another bipartisan accomplishment right here and help the job creators who need it. This is precisely the kind of approach we should be taking here in the Senate, putting aside these giant partisan bills that Democrats know Republicans won't support and focusing on smaller proposals that can actually garner support from nearly everyone and make it onto the President's desk for a signature. These are small steps, but they're progress. Let's keep at it. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for 70 minutes, with the senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled by the two leaders or their designees, with the Republicans controlling the first 40 minutes and the majority controlling the final 30 minutes.
Madam President.
Senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to enter into a colloquy with my Republican colleagues, Senator Grassley of Iowa, Senator Coburn of Oklahoma, for up to 30 minutes.
Without objection.
Recently, the Des Moines Register reported that an Iowa-based insurance company has decided to exit the health insurance market, abandoning insurance sales directly to individuals and families. So what's the net effect of all of that? 35,000 policyholders will lose their insurance. Calls to mind that famous promise by the President, quote, "If you like your plan, you can keep it," unquote. Now, the story doesn't stop there. It has an even more profound impact on the lives of real people. The impact goes on. 110 employees will lose their job. 70 of those employees are in Nebraska. That calls to mind Speaker Pelosi's broken promise, quote, "The law will create 4 million jobs, 400,000 jobs almost immediately," unquote. The driving factor for all of this is a Health and Human Services regulation required by the health care law, which micromanages how insurance companies can spend their revenues. Now, unfortunately, this job loss in Nebraska is not an anomaly. A recent survey of nearly 2,400 independent health insurance agents and brokers from all over came to this conclusion. Just 1 month after this HHS regulation took effect, more than 70% had experienced a decline in their revenues. And, more shocking, nearly 5% had lost their jobs. The Government Accountability Office reported that most of the insurers they interviewed were reducing individuals' commissions. Now, these are not the big insurance companies that were railed against in the health care debate. These are not the big insurance companies that are being squeezed. The good folks that are being squeezed are the mom-and-pop agencies that we find on Main Street throughout the United States. Yes, these are the folks that we go to support the local football team, the local high school, the local 4-H club, whatever the civic cause may be. And yet, with unemployment hovering around 9%, the health care law puts the hammer on these people. I have reached the conclusion long ago that the health care law is bad for job creation, and it's bad for keeping your job. The Des Moines-based insurance company's CEO, job loss, according to him, was, quote, "a fairly predictable consequence of the regulation," unquote. UBS Investment Research called the health care law, and again I'm quoting, "the biggest impediment to hiring, which has the added drawback of straining state and federal budgets," unquote. The National Federation of Independent Businesses said, and I'm quoting again, "small business owners everywhere are rightfully concerned that the unconstitutional new mandates, countless rules, and new taxes in the health care law will devastate their businesses and their ability to create jobs," unquote. What we are seeing with this law is a massive amount of overregulation. According to a recent Wells Fargo Gallup small business poll, government regulations are the most important problem facing our small business owners. Now, if we just focus again on the health care law, that legislation alone has resulted in 10,000 pages of new federal regulations and notices. 10,000 pages. How could any small business comply? The employer mandate penalizes employers for growing. It's as simple as that. It forces employers who do not provide acceptable coverage to pay a penalty of $2,000 per full-time employee. But you see, the penalty is applied to firms with more than 50 employees. And as a small business owner in the Bellevue, Nebraska area recently explained to me, I'm not growing my business over 50 employees. I don't want to deal with your health care law. Well, as I mentioned, this discussion starts, at least today, with that article in the Des Moines Register. And with me today is the very respected senator from the state of Iowa, Senator Grassley. And I've just asked Senator Grassley, what impact do you see arising out of this health care law in your state and even more broadly across this country?
I think, number one, thank you, Senator Johans, for your leadership in this area, and you've spoken on regulations quite regularly on the Senate floor and also on our caucus, and I thank you for your leadership in that area. Number one, I would say, there's a certain irony between a president who's going around the country now talking about we got to pass legislation to create jobs, at the very same time as you demonstrated in your remarks that there's a health care bill law being instituted that is making people unemployed. There's also a certain irony in what the President does and the Secretary of HHS does with what Speaker Pelosi said at the time the bill was up. You know, we got to pass this bill to see what this bill really does. Well, now we're finding out really what it does. And people don't like what it does. You spoke about regulations causing this unemployment. And you spoke about 10,000 pages of regulations. That's probably 10,000 pages of regulations out of the 66,000 pages of legislation or of regulation that we've had just this year. Just this year. And 10,000 of that deals with health care. But think about the other 57,000 pages that deal with other pieces of legislation that is a problem for small business. Particularly small business. This, I guess, is a problem for all business, but particularly for small business. So far, I think just a few regulations have been issued adding up to that 10,000 pages. People can read this 2,700-page bill and understand what's in it. And most of them read it and understand what's in it before Speaker Pelosi said we got to pass it to find out what's in it. I didn't like what's in it. But in this bill, there's 1,693 pages of, let me back up. There's 1,693 delegations of authority to write regulations. So if you got 10,000 pages so far, just based upon the few regulations that have been written, just think what it's going to be like when all of the pages are printed for the 1,693 regulations that are done. So I think we're just seeing the cap of the iceberg so far in this legislation. The damage that's done to employment and lack of job creation is just starting. That's my comment on what you do. I have some remarks I'd like to make if it's okay with you, but I thank you, and if you have to go to a committee meeting, I understand. This is not the first time that this situation has happened in Iowa, and it's coming at a time when people need stability. American families are struggling to put food on their tables, pay their utility bills as winter arrives, and purchase health insurance as costs are skyrocketing. In other words, the President's promise, pass this legislation, is going to keep health care premiums down. Why, that's misleading people. At a time when as Senator Johanns said, another promise made was if you like what you have, you're going to be able to keep it. Well, we've got, I don't know exactly the figure, I got it here coming up. There's a figure of several thousand people in our state that aren't going to be able to keep the health insurance that they like and they already have because of this company closing down individual policies. Unemployment continues to hover around 9%, and a million Americans are underemployed. And here we got a health care bill that's causing more people to be unemployed as well as not keeping the health insurance they want. With the economic situation that our country's facing, Congress must re-examine its actions and realize the errors through partisan votes that are made because of partisan votes. And this bill was an entirely partisan piece of legislation. Unlike most social contracts in America that have been passed like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, civil rights legislation, those were bipartisan pieces of legislation because it was felt that when you're making this difference in America, you ought to have a broad consensus that major changes like this ought to be made. But in this particular case, it was very partisan. So I want to go over what Senator Johanns said about the Des Moines Register article. The American Enterprise Group, an insurance company participating in the individual health insurance markets in Iowa and Nebraska, are leaving the market. This action shows the importance of repealing and replacing the health care overhaul passed by Democrats in Congress, signed by the President last year, before the situation would deteriorate even further. Just think what it's going to be like when we get the rest of these 1,693 delegations of authority to the bureaucracy to write regulations. American Enterprise, that company, notified 110 employees in Iowa and Nebraska that they'll lose their jobs sometime during the next 3 years. American Enterprise is leaving the individual health insurance market as a result of the instability caused by the implementation of this health care reform bill. American Enterprise stated that it will no longer sell individual health insurance policies because of the regulatory environment created by the health care reform bill. This is an isolated incident for Iowa, this one company, because the Principal Financial Group left the small group insurance market in 2010, and Principal Financial isn't any little Main Street operation. It's one of the major financial groups in the United States, but still they could not find it to be competitive to stay in the individual market. This has cost then many Iowans their jobs while leaving scores of small businesses and their employees to choose from health insurance plans in a health insurance market where there is less and less competition. The regulatory culprit in this instance is a medical loss ratio regulation of this legislation. This regulation requires insurers to pay a certain percentage of premiums and claims. And I know supporters will defend the regulation as, quote, unquote, keeping insurers in check, but the real-world effect is to force insurers to leave the market, thereby reducing competition and choice available to consumers. Just exactly what the President promised, that we are going to have competition, keep price down, and people are going to have choice. They're going to be able to keep what they want if they have it. But in this case of these people, that isn't a promise kept. That turns out to be a falsehood. The small group and individual markets happen to be very volatile. That's the problem. Insurers bear risk and set their premiums accordingly. Insurers are making a rational decision to get out of the market because the risks have become too great. Competition is reduced. Costs rise. Once upon a time, the President promised Americans that if they like the insurance plan they have, you can keep it. This is more evidence that promise rings hollow. This recent plan pullout will leave 35,000 individuals without insurance plans that they have grown accustomed to. Forcing people to choose a different insurance option can lead to higher costs and may limit the health care accessibility that these individuals have depended on for years. This is especially detrimental when these individuals have pre-existing conditions or an acute chronic disease. The President specifically promised that if these people want to keep their health care coverage, they would be able to do it with the passage of that law. This is just one of the many examples of how this overhaul has led to broken promises made by the President when pushing through the passage of this legislation in a partisan way. These problems will certainly continue as more regulations are written. The Congressional Budget Office expects people in the individual market to see an average of 10 to 13% rise in premium costs, and solely based on the passage of the health care law. Is that increased accessibility or affordability? No, of course it isn't. Not only has the health care overhaul caused health insurance companies to leave parts of the health insurance market and health insurance costs to increase, it has also put added burden on employers. Some employers will no longer offer their employees health care coverage. Higher taxes and mandates put on employers by new health care law have left many employers without resources to maintain current coverage for family members of their employees. The negative impact of this legislation is having on large employers and those insured by employers is demonstrated by the National Business Group on Health. In its recent annual survey, overall plan costs for large employers are expected to rise by 6% in 2012. The National Business Group on Health also notes that 7 out of 10 employers will lose their grandfather status, meaning that employees will lose their current health care plan and employers will be subject to additional regulations. According to the same survey, 3 out of 10 employers are unsure if they will continue to insure employees due to the health care bill. Other employers will increase the employee's share of insurance premium, and many employers state that they will likely lower the level of health care coverage offered to their employees. Walmart, as an example, will not allow many of its new part-time employees to receive health care insurance through the company. Many of these workers are already underemployed. They work hard, yet don't always have adequate resources to purchase health insurance on their own, especially as costs in individual insurance markets continue to increase due to the new law. Additionally, many businesses are simply dropping coverage for their own employees because of the extra cost incurred in the legislation. It's more affordable for some employers to drop coverage for their employees and pay the fine associated with the employer mandate. An employer must provide health insurance for their employees if they have more than 50 employees or 50 full-time equivalent. Employers who are required to insure employees will be fined $2,000 per employee who seeks health insurance through one of the exchanges created under the health care overhaul. And any employer-sponsored plan must meet the definitions of HHS on what an adequate plan is. This requirement will increase health insurance costs for employers and employees when they must upgrade health insurance benefits in order to meet the standards defined by the Department of HHS. Forcing employers to provide health insurance when they have a tough time hiring new employees just adds to the burden employers are facing in a struggling economy. Employers will likely pay their increased health insurance costs by reducing employee take-home pay or by increasing the employee share of health insurance premiums. Also, employers will continue struggling in future years as the federal government increases year by year the requirements of health insurance benefits needed to avoid a penalty. Furthermore, employers already faced with economic uncertainty have to deal with the government regulations that continue to change, adding to uncertainty. HHS rule released last November allows fully insured group plans to switch insurance providers as long as the insurance benefit provided to the beneficiaries remain comparable. However, this is only for group plans that switch after November 15th last year. HHS wrote this new rule so more group plans can find affordable coverage and shop around for similar coverage at cheaper rates. But the group insurance plan carrier was changed before, if the group plan carrier was changed before November the 15th, the plan would lose grandfather status and then be subject to a whole bunch of new regulations. Ironically, what created the need for this new rule was another rule that the President's administration and HHS crafted June last year that stated plans would lose their grandfather status if they switched carriers. This chaotic situation shows what happens when the government is given more authority to regulate the health insurance market. Madam President, what we have here is a mess. We need to put a halt to the implementation. We need to repeal the law and start over again with common sense solutions. We need to move away from the regulatory and bureaucratic nightmare that is costing Americans their coverage and too many Americans their jobs. And with 10,000 pages of regulations at this point, just think what it's like when all 1,693 regulations get written. I yield the floor.
I thank Senator Grassley for his explanation of what this law is doing and the impact it is having. Today, of course, we're starting our discussion with the article from the Des Moines Register, which talked about the regulatory impact. But we can't forget that there's other pieces to this law that have just as severe an impact. And I'd like to spend a minute or two here talking about the destructive taxes that are in this legislation. Now, when you add it all up, the new health care law basically required new taxes of about $500 billion, not to pay down the national debt, not to solve the nation's debt woes, but to create a new entitlement. The Treasury Department's Inspector General for Tax Administration has looked at the impact of the health care law and the tax code, and he said this, and I'm quoting, "Law is the largest set of tax law changes in 20 years," unquote. That's no small undertaking when you think about all that has happened over the last couple of decades, that we ended up with a impact on the tax code that is the largest set of tax law changes in 20 years, according to the Treasury expert that looked at this. There are 42 separate provisions adding to or amending the Internal Revenue Code in the health care law. So much of this law was put together in the last days of this debate, and people were scrambling around trying to read it and understand it and get information out to their constituents. And Speaker Pelosi was saying, well, we'd probably just have to pass this law to figure out what's in it. And now we are figuring out what's in it, and it's so much more than a health care law. 42 separate provisions add to or amend the Internal Revenue Code. The Boston Globe has weighed in on this, and they point out that the 2.3% excise tax on medical device suppliers, according to the Globe, quote, will force industry leaders to lay off workers and curb the research and development of new medical tools, unquote. Well, there's just no question about it. When you add up the tax law changes, the impact from a regulatory standpoint, and the other provisions of this law, this is not going to result in the promised jobs that Speaker Pelosi spoke of. It's a job killer. If you look at what this law is doing, it will actually shrink the labor force, actually create a disincentive to work or to receive a pay raise. I referenced earlier in my comments a small business owner in the Bellevue, Nebraska area. I was sitting in a business roundtable a little more than a year ago, and we were just going around the room, and I was listening to small businesses describe to me some of the challenges that they face. And this woman, this small business owner, said to me, she said, you know, Mike, we have studied this health care law every which way we can. I am right on the edge of having 50 employees. I am told that if I go over 50 employees, I am now subject to all of the ramifications of the health care law. After looking at this, I have decided I will not grow my business beyond 50 employees. I do not want to deal with this health care law. Well, her discussion with me has stuck with me all of these months. Why is it that Washington would actually pass legislation that would discourage her from hiring additional employees to grow her business? It makes no sense whatsoever. Why are we here in Washington creating a disincentive for the small business owner? Why are we costing Americans jobs? The Congressional Budget Office has looked at this legislation, and they come to the conclusion that the American labor supply will be reduced by 800,000 workers. The CBO quote is this, quote, "The law will encourage some people to work fewer hours or to withdraw from the labor market," unquote. The more we learn about this health care law, the more we come to realize that this is flawed policy. And it passed and it was signed into law by the President of the United States. But it goes beyond flawed policy. It impacts real people who are trying to make a real living. My comments today started with the story about 50 Nebraskans that lost their jobs or are about to lose their jobs because of the health care law. And I am concerned, Mr. President, that it is not going to stop there. That as employers are more and more burdened with the thousands of pages of regulations, they will come to realize that their best strategy is to try to figure out how they deal with these new requirements, and they will pull back on hiring, which is exactly what we don't want to have happen in this economy. With that, Mr. President, I conclude my remarks in our colloquy today. I yield the floor. And I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President,
Senator from Wyoming is recognized.
I'd ask that further action under the quorum call be waived.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also ask unanimous consent that Senator from Illinois and the Senator from Kentucky be allowed to enter into a colloquy with me for the time that we have allotted.
Without objection.
Okay. I'm going to talk about a problem that I've tried to solve for 14 years. And today, I think we have a new solution and the solution. This has to do with sales taxes that are not being collected at the present time. It's a little loophole in the tax law. I used to be a retailer, and I never thought that it was fair that I had to collect the sales taxes, but the people from out of state didn't have to collect the sales tax. I used to be a mayor, and this bill that we have is a jobs bill and an infrastructure bill. A lot of people don't realize that sales tax helps pay for schools and police and firemen. They may not realize that it pays for infrastructure like streets and sewers. I always tell people that it's a little tough to flush your toilet over the internet. But this bill would allow states, not require states, to be able to have the out-of-state online sellers, provided they sell more than $500,000 in a year, to collect the sales tax. I've also been a state legislator, and I can tell you as a state legislator, we never intended to pass a law that would just force the people, the retailers on Main Street who buy the yearbooks and participate in all the community activities, to be the ones to collect the tax, and anybody from out of state or out of town not have to do it. So this cleans up that little problem at the same time. Does it make much of a difference? Yes. We're being asked as Congress to give money to the states for their teachers and their firemen and their infrastructure. And it's because there's a decreasing amount of revenue going to them through sales taxes that are owed. People may not realize it, but when they buy something online, if the tax isn't collected, they still owe it. This is not a new tax. It's a tax that's already on the books. No legislator ever intended for it to just be for those Main Street retailers. And as a result, we have a number of support letters for this new bill, and I hope everybody will take a look at it. They can get to it online. But here are some of the groups, and I'd ask unanimous consent that these letters be made a part of the record.
Without objection.
Have one from the National Conference of State Legislators, one from the National Association of Counties, the National League of Cities, the Federation of Tax Administrators, the National Retail Federation, the Retail Industry Leaders Association, the International Council of Shopping Centers, the Simon Property Group Incorporated, the Neiman Marcus Group, the Jewelers of America, Best Buy, and I want to read the one from Amazon.com because they are one of the world's largest online sellers, and in the past have opposed previous versions of the bill, but they think that we've got this one right. They say, thank you very much for your legislation on interstate sales tax collection. Amazon strongly supports enactment of your bill and will work with you, your colleagues in Congress, retailers, and the states to get this bipartisan legislation passed. It's a win-win resolution, and as analysts have noted, Amazon offers customers the best prices with or without sales tax. If enacted, your bill will allow states to require out-of-state retailers to collect sales tax at the time of purchase and remit those taxes on behalf of customers. And it will facilitate collection on behalf of third-party sellers. Thus, your bill will allow states to obtain additional revenue without new taxes or federal spending and will make it easy for consumers and small retailers to comply with state sales tax laws. Amazon is grateful for your hard work on the issue, and we look forward to working with you and your colleagues in Congress to pass this resolution. We have a number of others that we will also list. Now, this is a bipartisan bill. The original co-sponsors on it are 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, and a key person in this has been the Senator from Illinois, Senator Durbin, who has turned in a previous version of the bill, and we encourage you to take a look at that one, but to see the difference that there is in this new version that I think is a very passable bill. And so at this point, I'd ask Senator Durbin if he had any comments that he'd like to share, because he's been an integral part of making this bipartisan and realizing the plight that the retailers and the local governments are in.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and thanks to my colleague, Senator Enzi. I want to give fair warning to all who are witnessing debate that bipartisanship is about to break out on the floor of the United States Senate. And you can witness it because we have a bipartisan effort led by Senator Enzi, who has really been dedicating his life as a former retailer, his life in public service, as a former retailer, to be sensitive to the needs of Main Street and small business. For years, he worked with our former colleague, Senator Byron Dorgan of North Dakota, and they did their best to pass this legislation. And when Senator Dorgan retired, I approached Senator Enzi and said, I'd like to join in this effort. And I'm honored to be on the floor with him and our mutual friend, Senator Alexander, in this combined bipartisan effort to deal with an issue that I think is essential to fairness in our economy and helping small businesses thrive, which is the key to economic revitalization. If you ask the small businesses in my home state of Illinois what they want, it's not a big handout from Washington, nor any special attention. Frankly, they ask for a level playing field. Let them compete. And what Senator Enzi has said is that many retailers in my state, his, and every state are finding it more difficult to compete because they have to rent a building or buy one. They have to pay the property taxes. They're, of course, going to pay utility bills and local taxes that might be generated because of their sales, either to the state or local government. And in each instance, they are investing back in the community and state that they live in. That is part of the basic understanding we have in this country, that we are, in fact, in this together and that we need to cooperate so that the businessman down the street who is selling something in a store is also at the same time supporting the local community to make sure that it has traffic lights and make certain that it has police protection and utilities and streets and curbs and gutters and everything that goes with it. But there's been a new phenomena in American marketplace over the last several decades, and now it is in full throat, and that is the Internet. Internet sales are an amazing entity where we can literally click a mouse and buy a product that will arrive several days later at our home or business place. But it also has invited an inequity, an unfairness that we address in this bill. We are not creating any new taxes in this bill. I say to my friends on both sides of the aisle, that is not our intention, nor does this bill do that. What it does is to provide a mechanism to collect existing tax that's owed under existing law, period. And we do this in a fashion that Senator Alexander will describe in a moment that capitalizes on the technology and software available today to make this a process that is not burdensome and does not slow down commerce in any way. Mr. President, I recently went to Bloomington, Illinois, and a number of other communities in my state, and sat down with local retailers and had them tell the stories, in many cases depressing stories about what they're going through. In one instance, this fellow sells camping gear and outdoor wear, and he also sells some snorkeling equipment and some ski equipment, and it's not unusual now for him and for others who are selling that type of sporting equipment to have local customers come in and look for the product they want, actually get a fitting to make sure they get the right size, and then leave to order it on the Internet so they can escape any sales tax liability. Well, that isn't fair to the local merchant, and it certainly wasn't the intention in Illinois or any other state to impose a sales tax just on those businesses that physically exist in our states. And so this bill, the Marketplace Fairness Act, applies this sales tax across the board to sales across the United States. And it's voluntary. States have to decide they want to move into this field and use this opportunity. I think that's the way to approach it. Some 24 states, if I'm not mistaken, have already signed up to this Streamline Coalition, which allows them to make this happen. Other states, by complying with this law and passing a local state law, can do the same. It's their option. We don't impose it or demand it. It's their option, if they choose it, to use existing sales tax and to take the initiative at the state level. As Senator Alexander has reminded me many times, it is a states' rights issue, as it should be. And that's what we're focusing on in this legislation. I think it's an issue of fairness, and I think it goes beyond what we're facing today in terms of the disparity between Democrats and Republicans. We are coming together on behalf of tax fairness, coming together on behalf of states' rights, coming together to make certain that small businesses across America have the resources they need to prosper, be profitable, and we hope to expand their workforce. We need to create more jobs, and I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that to happen as these local retailers become more competitive and more profitable. I might also add that the states that decide to opt into it will have a source of revenue that will be helpful to them in difficult times. But again, it is their decision. I won't recount all of the groups that have endorsed this. Senator Enzi already has. It is a pretty impressive array. One of the most impressive supporters, he's read a letter from, Amazon. To think that one of the largest, if not the largest, online retailer in America endorses this bill. When I think back of all the battles that have been fought in all the states by Amazon, when each state tried to address this, I think it's telling that they have stepped forward and said, here is a solution that can work. And if the largest online retailer in America, or one of the largest, feels that way, it should encourage many colleagues who don't want to destroy that part of our economy, and I certainly don't either. So I think this is a positive step in the right direction. I want to thank Senator Tim Johnson, Senator Bozeman, Senator Jack Reed, Senator Blunt, Senator Whitehouse, and many others who are going to join Senator Enzi and Senator Alexander and myself in this effort to pass this bipartisan bill Let's get this done. Let's work together on a bipartisan basis to solve a problem that has haunted us for over a decade, to do it in a fair fashion that does not create any new taxes, but gives to the states the right to collect those taxes that are already on the book. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Tennessee. The minority has 20 seconds left.
I ask consent to extend the time into the colloquy into Democratic time.
Is there objection?
No objection.
Without objection.
I thank the Democratic whip for that. Well, I want to congratulate Senator Enzi and Senator Durbin and say how pleased I am to join as a co-sponsor in their legislation. And here's what I want to congratulate them for. Senator Enzi said he came to this as a former mayor, as a former shoe shop owner, and as a former legislator. I come as a former governor. And in our constitutional framework, I've always thought it was our business in Tennessee to decide what services we wanted to provide and what taxes we wanted to levy to pay for them. For example, we have a high sales tax, but we have no income tax. That's different than most states who have a low overall tax burden. And so, for me, this is, as Senator Durbin and I have discussed, is a matter of states' rights. But the most important thing I think I could say today, or that we could say today, is I think they've solved the problem with this legislation. This problem's been there for a long time. It's had the opposition of conservatives worried about taxes. It's had the opposition of Amazon and other online sellers. The Supreme Court said 20 years ago that it was too complicated for out-of-state vendors to figure out how to collect sales taxes when something is purchased and send it to the state, which is what the Main Street seller does. And maybe that was true 20 years ago. But the Supreme Court said 20 years ago it invited us in Congress to solve this problem. And Senator Enzi and Senator Durbin, with this legislation, in my opinion, have solved the problem, and this is going to happen. Now, I'm not presumptuous enough to predict what the United States Congress will do and what the President will sign. But I think I've been around long enough and I've watched Congress enough to say this is going to happen. And if I were a governor, if I were an online retailer, or if I were a catalog retailer, I would make my plans to conduct my business in this way. Why do I say that? Well, for one thing, times have changed. This morning I got up and looked up the weather in my hometown. So I put in weather 37886, that's my zip code, and back came the information. Under the bill that Senator Durbin and Senator Enzi have proposed, the state would have the option of completely creating a system for the Amazon, let's say, as an example, an online seller. All they'd have to do if I buy a $300 or $400 television set is they put my name in, they put in my zip code, and the software that the state has provided will tell them what the tax is and will even electronically transfer the tax money back to the state. In other words, Amazon will do the same thing that the appliance store in Maryville, Tennessee will do, and that's what we intended to happen. I mean, when we passed a sales tax in Tennessee, I wasn't around then, but I was around when it's been raised, we didn't intend to exempt some people over others. We didn't intend to subsidize some businesses over others. We made a general decision that when you buy things in Tennessee, we're going to pay for them primarily with a sales tax. We have a local sales tax and we have a state sales tax, and that's our right to decide. Some of the opposition in the past has come from conservative groups, and it was important just yesterday to see the president of the American Conservative Union write a very strong letter in support of a House version of this same bill. And I talked with him yesterday, Mr. Al Cardenas, a businessman from Florida, and he's reviewing our bill. 10 years ago, William F. Buckley wrote about this problem and said that it was a loophole and needed to be solved. And when states decided to subsidize some taxpayers over others and some businesses over others, that was not good conservative philosophy. So I think on all sides, when you have Amazon
supporting in the strong letter that Senator Enzi read. When you have the president of the American Conservative Union on the same day announcing his support for the same principles, I think you've solved the problem. And what we've seen over the last 20 years is a great many voluntary agreements between companies like Amazon and other companies that sell online or sell by catalogs to say, okay, now that we've figured out how to do it, it's fine with us. And as Amazon just said, they're in business to compete, and they can sell their goods, they claim, cheaper online than they can buy them in Senator Enzi's store in Gillette, Wyoming. Maybe they can, maybe they can't, but at least they'll have a level playing field, and both the store in Wyoming and Gillette, Wyoming, and the seller online will both do the very same thing. They'll collect the sales tax that's already owed from the purchaser, and they'll send it directly to the state, which has been the way things have worked for a long time. So this is an issue about preserving the state's right to collect or not to collect its own sales tax. It's about closing a tax loophole. It's about stopping the subsidization of some businesses over others, of some taxpayers over others. Here's what William F. Buckley said about it, and I'll conclude my remarks in just a moment. The mattress maker in Connecticut doesn't like it if out-of-state businesses are in practical terms subsidized. That's what the non-tax amounts to. Local concerns are complaining about traffic in mattresses and books and records and computer equipment that ordered through the Internet come in, so to speak, duty-free. And of course, governors and legislators are up in arms as well. According to the National Council of Legislators, this loophole cost states $28 billion. And Tennessee could use this money to ward off a state income tax, which we don't have and we don't want. Wyoming could use the revenue to reduce its property tax. Other states might reduce rising college tuitions, or they might reward outstanding teachers. This has been a problem for the last 20 years. But Senator Enzi and Senator Durbin, with their legislation, have solved the problem. So I'll stop where I started. This is not a new tax. It's an existing tax. It's not on the Internet. It's on all sales. And what Senator Enzi and Durbin have done have solved the problem. And I predict that because of the voluntary agreements and the ease of out-of-state vendors doing the same thing that Main Street vendors do, that very soon we'll eliminate these subsidies, close this loophole, and I congratulate them for their years of work in this area. I'm happy to join 10 senators, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, in co-sponsoring this legislation.